Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. We made it. We're finally here. School of Emo is happening. And I wanted to start this podcast in the way, I guess, that it deserves and talk about why we're even doing this. Why am I here? Who am I? What is this podcast going to be about? What can you expect? And do you want to join in on this little community that is starting from scratch? First off, I want to simply invite you into kind of my basement. We are technically upstairs, but we're going to pretend that this is like my basement of my parents' house. We've been listening to music for hours, and now we're just having a heart-to-heart chat about things that we love that may not really matter in the grand scheme of things, but make up our day-to-day life and who we are. So if that is something that you are interested in, grab a comfy seat, sit on the floor, turn on your favorite record, and let's chat. So why are we here? I have had the dream to start this podcast for like 3 years now. And the reason why is because in my work, my professional job, my professional life, I do podcasts, I do content creation, and I enjoy it. I love being on video, connecting to people online. I think it's a lot of fun. And I have always daydreamed about what it would be like to connect with people, not in a professional sense, but with just community of people who have similar interests to me, because I've done that in a way, but it's not fully just me. It's me, serving, giving back, working. It's less fun. And that reminds me of the days of early internet. I'm 32 years old now, almost 33. And I remember getting our first computer whenever I was middle school aged, hitting puberty, right? And I remember when we first got internet, the days of dial up where you couldn't like be on the phone and be on the internet at the same time. So internet time was coveted in our home, and it was something that usually was only available late at night. It wasn't readily available during the day. It's almost like you have your normal life, and then you get to come back home to the computer and get on the internet and have a completely different world that you are part of. And I fell in love with this idea of not necessarily an alternate life, but being able to open up parts of myself that I didn't really get to discover in my day-to-day world, which we're definitely going to talk about. And it's going to come up in my own story and who I am and my experience with like the emo pop punk alternative space, because it's not going to look like everyone else's. But it started in those chat rooms, in navigating MySpace, coding for Zanga, and coming across websites of people who had different experiences and perspectives than I had, playing games in chat rooms, all of those different things. And so when I was thinking about this podcast, it brought back the memories of those late nights on the computer, connecting to people across the world over things that people in my normal life weren't really into. And I'm hoping that that can be what we experience here. It's what I want the most out of this, truly. And if it is only for me, it's only for me, and that's okay too. But why are we here? Where did this even come from? I have had a love for this scene and this world, the music in this space since I was very young. But I did not grow up in a place that like welcomed that necessarily. I didn't grow up with friends that were interested in the same music as me. We had no scene There were no concerts near me. There were no garage bands, truly, because I'm from a small, small town in South Arkansas. You may hear it, you may not hear it, but that is where I began my life. I'm from a very conservative religious family. We can get into that at another time. I'm not bitter towards that, but I grew up, in church on the weekends. My grandfather was the pastor of our church. My mom was like the Sunday school teacher. And we grew up in a place in the South where, country music was king. That's what everyone listened to. That's what was available. It's what people connected to, which I totally understand. There were a lot of relatable strings tied there, and that's what people were drawn towards. Our weekends were filled with football games, sports, and gathering in parking lots to hang out. That's all we had available to us. If you wanted to go to a concert, you drove an hour, hour and a half away. And, we didn't necessarily have the most money. And so, being, in middle school, I found myself loving a world that I didn't have access to fully, because it was before the internet was readily available. I wasn't really connected to many other people. Music wasn't honestly readily available, especially if it wasn't on the radio. And again, radios where I'm from played like a little bit of, early 2000s R&B rap, which is the superior rap and R&B, I believe, hip hop, whatever. But that was available. Christian music was available in my circles, and country music was extremely available. And so getting into a world that I would come to like love continuously throughout the rest of my life was really interesting for me. And so as I've gotten older, this is the music I listen to every day. These are the bands that I go see in concert now that I have money, I have availability to travel. I can make my own decisions, all that stuff. And this is something that I share with a very, 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 very small group of people that I've pulled in. And so when I was thinking about doing a podcast or exploring the world of content outside of my professional life, I wanted to learn more and connect more to this larger community that I have kind of felt like I've been on the outskirts of for a large portion of my life. I'm feeding my teenage self, myself going through puberty right now, as I learn about different things in this world that I never fully had access to. So that is where we're at. And I want to have fun as we explore this, because I again, I didn't get to experience a lot of the things that we'll talk about: the lore, the history, the drama, the opinions, the experiences that people have had, what scenes were like, right? I can only imagine. I didn't get firsthand experience with a lot of those things. I didn't learn those things as I wasn't in those chat rooms. I didn't know that they existed, right? I didn't have that door to those spaces. And so I'm excited for an opportunity to learn it now, talk to hopefully many of you. We'll talk about that as we go. Bring on people who have had experience maybe with some of the bands that we love, and just get to kind of relive that with you and experience it for the first time myself, because I think it will bring even more fun and enjoyment to this part of my life that it has been there and is continuing to grow in my 30s. So that's the only reason that we're here. Truly. I am no expert. I am, I want to go through my own story, what I'll call my own emo story, but I'm not an expert. I'm not someone that's going to say, I'm a super fan of any one particular band. I'm not. I'm not going to try to define things and say my opinion is number one. I don't have a lot of ego or arrogance in this space. probably because I haven't experienced it like so many others have. But honestly, I think the emo world to me is meant to be open for multiple experiences and truths to exist. I don't think that this is meant to be a black and white space. I think this is meant to be and was always meant to be a space for people who, like, for people to be kind of free, to be themselves fully, to express themselves and not be like judged or put into boxes for that. So that is what you will not expect from the show as much as possible. And that is something I ask that if you are joining in as part of this community, if you want to come on and talk and share, that you take that same perspective and approach, because that, and I could be wrong, correct me, I guess, but I don't think that the emo scene, this space, is meant to be judgmental or exclusive, because why else would we all be here, right? We've been excluded from other spaces, some more than others. So this is a place for us to be expressive and free. And in a coming episode, I think this will be even more true, because we're going to have to define what is emo. And I know that that is a controversial statement to make, because you may think that this is not emo, and that's okay. We're going to figure that out. Yes, emo has a better ring to it, something I think a lot of people relate to a lot more. But are we alternative? Are we pop punk? We'll see. We'll discover it. We'll debate it. We'll talk about it. But we're not going to fight over it, because what's the point, right? We're all technically on the same page. We're all trying to figure it out together, have fun, and live our lives. That's what we're here for. That's what I believe. And that's what I'm here for. So, what is my emo story? Where did this all begin for me? Because you may look at me and I'm not like a typical alt. I'm not goth. I don't have a certain aesthetic to me that you would maybe attribute to someone in like an emo scene. I don't know what your opinions or expectations would have been. I don't think I necessarily look, quote unquote, the part. But I do have my own story of where my love, especially for the music, began. And like many of us, it was linked to trauma in childhood. So I mentioned I grew up in a small town in South Arkansas. A lot of very people who, very rural people, all kind of went similar paths. A lot of people believe the same things. And I grew up, in I think the golden era of time, born in 92 and, grew up through late 90s to early 2000s, got to see internet become available, but it wasn't always available to me. And the downside, there's so many positives to that I would never want to trade. I have a lot of empathy and compassion for kids, teens now, or even after my generation. But when you're growing up in such a small place, the world and worldviews and perspectives can feel very small, because you're not exposed to much else, right? And unfortunately, it can breed hate towards people. It can breed like stereotypes and things like that, for sure. It also can breed a bit of hopelessness for many people, because if you are struggling or stuck in something, if you're not seeing other people experience that in a different way, then if the world that you are stuck in, that small space, if people aren't talking about things that they're feeling or making it through hard times together, right? You're not seeing that success. Like, you don't know that that's available to you, which is a wild concept now, because kids have access to so much that we just didn't whenever I was younger, be on TV. And even then, like, shows towards kids, like, there were very few shows that talked about some of these harder things. We found them as we got a little older, but especially from a very kind of conservative, more religious household, I didn't always have those things available to me. So whenever I was very young, I think it was like kindergarten age, my dad was diagnosed with HIV/AIDS. We don't have it. My mom doesn't have it. We were already born, my sister and I. And, I'm not going to get into all the controversy of that. I think you can probably feel the heaviness of that. At that time, there were so many stereotypes, there were so many unknowns about this. And we were told that this was the diagnosis. I was very, very little. And then we were told that, he was going to be in the hospital. We were going to try some experimental treatments. He may not live. That was communicated. And also, it was communicated, even maybe without words, that this wasn't something that we would talk about, that there was judgment around this, that this was going to exclude him from spaces. And we don't discuss it. We have to be private. And that continued throughout all of my childhood, teens, even into adulthood. Now it feels almost wrong talking about it, which I don't care about anyone's opinions about that now. But it was ingrained in me. So even though I had a stable home beyond that, right? My parents, they never got divorced. Like, they were together. Were they the most loving? No. Was there abuse? No. But they weren't necessarily connected. They were struggling with their own things. We were fairly well off financially for our community that we lived in, middle class. Like, there were struggles I see now that we just weren't exposed to as the kids as much. And I'm grateful for that. Did well in school, like, overall, like, the home was very stable. But whenever this happened and my dad got sick, it threw this uncertainty of life in the picture. My mom was the sole provider primarily until my dad got a lot better. But there were just many years of in and out of the hospital for multiple months. Moving forward, my dad got cancer multiple times. He ended up dying of lung cancer whenever I was 21. But it was just kind of a constant, like, is he going to die? Are we okay? Is this bad? There was a lot of fear instilled, which was good because we had to be mindful about blood. My dad was a mechanic at home. Didn't go to college. I don't think he actually graduated high school. He had a pretty rough past that he brought in to that. But, getting cut and having injuries, like, that was common because of his work. But that's, we can't share blood, right? And so there was a lot of fear around that. And just a lot of this kind of put on my sister and I very young and my entire family. And now I see it as, oh yeah, that was actually traumatic, of course. Throughout that time, this is where my professional world comes into play. I was often sick, had a lot of like digestion issues, probably linked to that and some infections I had as a kid, ended up with IBS. That led to a lot of insecurities, uncertainties in my own body, then entering puberty, all those things. Just became really messy. And so while on the outside, I had friends, I was really outgoing as a kid. I did really well in school. I would probably be what you deemed popular. I won awards. I was close to teachers. Was the one that was like leading the charge on the playground. But there was, from that age on, it felt like there was this secret side of me in my life that no one could have access to and that I needed to kind of close off. And no mental health help at that time, which I don't think existed for many of us in the 90s. But I began to learn how to mask what I felt, struggle in private. And I learned very quickly that, bad things happen. You need to get over it and keep moving forward. Like, there's no value in like throwing a pity party, right? Because that's how my mom approached it. It's how my dad approached it. And I would have these meltdowns because I felt it really deeply, but I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know where to express it. And I just started kind of separating this part of my life, the sadness I felt. that led to a draw towards certain books, certain themes. I would write poetry. I think we all, maybe all did this back in the day. Tell me if you did as well. But those like weird online like poetry submissions you could do like late at night or on my Zanga page. I would write this like dramatic poetry about how I felt. And even today, that's something I still do. It's like that's how I express hurt is through very dramatic poetry. I know I'm not alone in that because look at the lyrics that we listen to. But yeah, I began to kind of wall this off, and it started to kind of create this alternate life that I had. So fast forward middle school, that was already the draw, of course. But then you also bring boys into the picture. Boys, boys, boys. And I was boy crazy. Probably because like there was, I don't know, like I was also taught, right? We were all taught that girls need boys, whatever. So I was drawn to a lot of boys, and I was very attracted to the kind of emo skater boy thing. And there were a few of those, again, different than what most people probably were exposed to in their lives. But there were a few boys that I really liked early on. And I'd already listened to some of like the music that came across, like Good Charlotte, bands like that that were still kind of more mainstream and available. But some of these boys I initially liked a lot of music I hadn't been exposed to. And so, of course, I was going to listen. I was going to try to learn how to skateboard until I realized I could get really hurt. So I stopped that. But I was like, okay, I'm going to wear the fishnets. I'm going to look like Avril Lavigne. I'm going to listen to these bands. And that's actually where the music I listen to today, that's where a lot of it came from. Like it wouldn't have connected, I think, if I didn't have the sadness and the pain and the trauma that I had been going through in that part of my life already. Like I was built for it, I guess. But if these boys weren't in the picture, I probably wouldn't have been exposed to this music until much later in life, right? Because you had to go buy CDs. Like we could burn them. I'm a bit of a rule follower. Like um, I have a very type A brain. I think through processes a lot. You'll see that I have a lot of anxiety. And so I didn't necessarily lean heavily into like the pirated stuff, but I would have to buy CDs. You'd have to download music, different world at the time. So if you didn't know what bands you were trying to listen to, like there's a good chance you would never know those bands existed, which is just such a wild thought these days. So these boys introduced bands to me, and I fell in love with probably my top favorite band. And we can debate whether that's emo or not. I know they would say that, but Yellow Card. I'm more of a pop punk girly, truly to the core. But Yellow Card, this is also where like Simple Plan came into the picture, My Chemical Romance, bands like that. That was kind of the world I was in. Um, Linkin Park connected a lot to that with the anger I felt. Um, but these bands came in because of boys, and the boys didn't turn out well, of course, because they're boys and we were kids. And I mean, honestly, they were dumb, they were lost. But the music stayed. Boys faded, music stayed. So with these bands and like more of the emo world, that was one of the first times I think I learned how to express myself with the things I felt that I didn't know how to put into words, right? It's like the lyrics put into words how I was feeling, and sometimes dramatize them like they were, which was what I needed, right? A further expression of how I felt. Because for most of my life up until that point, like middle school ages, becoming a teenager, I had no idea how to express the pain, the hurt I felt. And even though the stories in the lyrics may not have been exactly the same as what I felt, and even today, like the things I connect to in music aren't necessarily direct, like correlations to my life, but the undertones, the emotion behind it, the experience behind it, is very much the same. And that is what connects all of us. You go to a concert and you know, you sing these lyrics that you used to only sing laying on like the bathroom floor crying your eyes out all alone. Now you're singing them with a group of people who sing them with the same emotion. It's like the same heartbeat. And in that moment, we're all connected and everything's okay. And I have to imagine that those of you, hopefully, that had those experiences where you had like a scene in a community that you were connected to early in life and like as a teen, I would imagine that that was so healing and freeing because I didn't get that until I was older, truly. So continuing on the thread, I kind of kept like there was that period in middle school where I was like, I'm gonna dress like Avril Lavigne, I'm gonna wear the baggy clothes and the fishnets. Of course, that shifted a bit. I was again small school, 52 people in my graduating class, top of the class, smart brain over here. But I was a cheerleader. I played softball. Like we all kind of did. It was a very different space, I think, than a lot of schools at that time. But we were all very close. We did a lot together, but we all began to kind of dress the same, be the same. And once again, there was like this divide. I had like two lives where I had the external of like, yeah, I knew all the pop songs. I knew the rap songs that we did like cheerleading dances to. I knew the country songs, you know, that all my friends loved and were connected to. Went to a handful of concerts. Like I was a Jonas Brothers fan. Like, you know, I still went in that path too and had that experience. And that's where I got to connect to others because that's what other people liked. And I did really love it. I think it trying to say that like, you know, you don't like certain things. Like, again, I'm not pretentious and arrogant. So I have a lot of open-mindedness to a lot of things. In high school, that's what I leaned more into. And then I found, you know, threads of music that I could go to. My mom would take me to concerts for Christian bands. So I found like this world of kind of Christian rock and like alternative Christian music. Under Oath was there, of course. I got to see some of these bands that were a little bit heavier, but also kind of goofy that I would consider to be kind of Christian punk, which is not punk at all. But I was at least able to kind of keep threads of that part of me. And then it was the late night chat rooms, watching Degrassi at night after my parents went to bed, you know, connecting to people in spaces online that I never had connections to in my day to day life. So that continued very walled off. And then I went to college and experienced like loneliness to the 10th degree, right? I was out of a space that I was very comfortable in. I found out that I didn't make friends easily. I thought I did, but what I didn't realize is that I grew up with all my friends for my entire life. So getting now into a space where I don't know anybody, like we didn't grow up together. I wasn't in a sorority, like I wasn't drawn to that. How do I how do I make friends? I wasn't partying, I wasn't cool to everyone else. Um, and I had a really hard time like connecting to people. And I began a track of like further like divide, or not necessarily as much of a divide, but maybe leaning more into the side of me that I hadn't really been able to share with anybody. The trauma, of course, came back of uncertainty. Nobody likes me. I don't fit in. Um, you know, no, I don't have relationships. I can't be too close to anyone. They'll leave, they'll die, they'll never get to know me because I can't share these parts of me. It's not safe, you know, all those feelings. I still struggle with those today in my 30s. Like I'm still working through that. Um, and the music came back. I began to listen to even more music that like Story of the Year, The Used, you know, these bands that other people probably had been exposed to already, of course. the people that were actually getting to go to Warped Tour. Like Warped Tour, I think came to Arkansas, but there was no way my parents were letting me go or that I was going to go. I was anxious and socially awkward and terrified. And I had no friends or connections. Like I couldn't do it, right? I couldn't be out of my norm in the big city for a concert. Like it just wasn't an option. So I didn't get to do any of that. But I did get to experience that music, in college a little bit. And then moving into adulthood, concerts opened up for me. And I finally began to see these bands I'd listened to, these lyrics that I loved, like the music that meant so much to me. I began to actually get to see it live and experience it with so many other people, and feel like a teenager again, in my early 20s, which is so crazy that like I couldn't imagine the people that got to experience that earlier than that. And I haven't stopped, as we'll learn, but they became an option. The first Yellow Card show, again, Yellow Card was always my favorite band. We'll talk more about them. I have a little interesting experience with them now as an adult, but I thankfully got to see their 2016 final tour when they split up before they recently came back. And it was that's that experience I refer to as like being so healing. It's like, this is a crowd I feel safe in, I feel good in, I feel connected to. And like I can experience like a lot of joy from also the music that brought a lot of pain or connected me to my pain. And I think Yellow Card was always the one that was more of the light from that pain. Their music is a lot brighter, lighter, happier. And so it was always more encouraging to me. It was my music I put on when I was sad and I needed to be cheered up versus needed to feel deeply. If that makes sense. So I got to experience that. I got to bring my now husband in to that concert. We started dating like right before, and I was going to go with another friend, and he sold his ticket to my boyfriend, now husband. I pulled him into the world that I'm in now, and I influenced him to like the same music. So now we have the records of bands we love. We go to concerts of bands that I'd followed forever. And we get to see, and we'll talk about some of the ones we saw last year. We went when we were young. We're about to go on an emo cruise. Like we get to do all these things together because I created my own little community with my spouse, which is possible. You can change people, regardless of what people say. You can change people. You can influence them if they're open to it, which thankfully he was. So that's my emo story. It sounds super, super dramatic, but it's where I am now. I have a playlist on Spotify that I've been building throughout my adult years from like mid-20s, I guess, since Spotify became a thing, whenever that was, which is also wild to think the time before Spotify. But, some of us switched from like Apple Music to Spotify or iTunes to Spotify. So on my Spotify, I have a playlist called Happy, and it has turned into just like the ultimate emo pop punk playlist, which is kind of a funny joke that the title does not reflect the actual lyrics because the lyrics are not happy. Most of them are very, very sad, but they make me happy. They energize me, as they probably do you if you like the same music. It's like there's something so energizing and joyful about feeling the deep pain and the deep feelings. I like the darker, harder, painful things because it's been part of my life and it's been something that's been hidden, and now it gets to be expressed a lot more. And thankfully in my job and my work, I get to do that as well in its own way. And I'm very grateful. But the way that I spend my time outside of that gets to involve, some of this, but it's the ultimate therapy, right? Because I'm expressing something versus keeping it in. And then I get to find joy as I express it. That's how I feel about this world of music. So I want to give you a few fun facts about me, because a lot of the episodes as we move forward are not going to be all centric around me. gonna have to get used to this of not being the one that's like teaching and whatever. Um, Ideally, I want you on. I want guests that can share. I want to learn from you. But a lot of the episodes moving forward are going to be, there's going to be some about like concerts and experiences, and I'll definitely share those with you. And I want you to share those with me. I want a community of that. But I'm also going to dig into some of the history, the lore, like all the fun stuff, the drama of things, the meanings of songs. Like we're going to get into all of that, which is going to be a lot of fun and way out of my comfort zone, which I'm excited for because that's where really cool things happen, even if no one listens. But as we're starting off, I do want to share a few fun facts about me so that you can connect to me. Maybe there's something beyond the music we love that connects us, because there also may be some disconnects we have in the music that we love. You may love something that I don't love. I may love something that you don't love. We may have different opinions on that. So maybe there's something else that can connect us too, so that we can stay connected and be online friends. And if there is something that connects that I share, please comment and share it back, because I don't want to just feel like I'm talking to an empty screen. I want to talk to you and be friends with you. So my favorite band will likely always be Yellow Card. And again, I don't think that they're emo. They wouldn't say that they're emo. Probably more pop punk, maybe pop rock, truly. But they've been with me since the beginning, and like, them breaking up and meeting some of the band, like there have been some moments where I think the reality of the band maybe has skewed some of my love for it. Um, the shows though are good. It's always been there, right? It's hard to let a favorite go when it's been a favorite for so long. So this may change and probably has changed. I'm just not letting it go fully. Some people may connect to that, but Yellow Card will probably always be my favorite band. My favorite in the last year, because every year or 6 months, I feel like I gravitate towards a band that has been around forever, that I've known the hits of, but then I go like deep dive, see them in concert, listen to all their old albums, like become like a mega fan of their music. And in the last year, it has been My Chemical Romance. Why? I don't know. I think it took me a while, I guess, just to like fall in love with them fully. Maybe, who knows? We'll call it what it is. It's what happens, the evolution of music. I don't listen to new music very often. It takes a lot. And usually it comes from a playlist. Like after I'm done listening to my playlist, it tells me the recommended songs. And I hear a few songs that aren't just the number one hits. And I'm like, oh, I haven't heard that band in a while. Let me go listen to their music. And then I just get obsessed. And that has been the case with My Chemical Romance in the last year. I got to see them at when we were young. They're the entire reason we went to when we were young. And it's exactly what I thought, because I'm usually against like stadium arena shows. I don't love it. I live in Nashville. Didn't mention that as an adult. I moved to Nashville, which is why concerts became available. And there is a bit of an alternative scene here. Like bands come here, that not always perfectly. Sometimes we have to go to Atlanta because country music is still obviously the ruler here. But I I was like I moved here after like a lot of bands were in like their prime. And then the bands that have been like My Chemical Romance, they came to Nashville. Like the cheerleading dress, I believe that was Nashville. But I don't go to arena shows because they're overwhelming to me. There's too many people, and the prices were always like way too high for the budget I had at the time. And so I just wouldn't go. And so I would see some of the other bands that would go to like the smaller venues. And I thought that they were more fun, more approachable. My anxiety could handle it. I don't love the arenas. And so I never got to see My Chemical Romance. And then they stopped touring as I became like, a big fan. And so whenever I saw that they were going to When We Were Young, I didn't get tickets at first, but as we got closer and closer, I just started to have this panic realization that there may be a chance that My Chemical Romance never tours again. And I want to see them at least once in my life. And I made it work. I got like some brand partnerships to go for my other job, or my real job. Talked my husband into it. So very last minute, within like, I think 3 weeks before the festival, we bought tickets, we went, And of course, they announced the tour after. And thankfully, we are adults with real money and we don't have kids. And so we are going this year to the actual tour. We're going to go to Philadelphia because they're not coming to Nashville. And it's going to be wonderful. But I knew that that would happen. It was like at the minute that we shell out all this money to go to when we were young just to see them, then they're not going to tour anymore. And we will talk about when we were young because it was amazing. And I overly prepared and had an interesting experience of it. But seeing My Chemical Romance was the highlight of my year. It was amazing. My favorite to see live, my favorite band to see live that never does me wrong. Like, I mean, My Chemical Romance is great, but a band that is accessible that I see probably the most often is Story of the Year. I love Story of the Year. Like they probably may be my favorite band if you really look at like the music I listen to, the what I see, how fun I have at their shows, the lyrics I know. But I love a Story of the Year show. If you do not see them anytime they are near you, you are missing out. They're so good live, talented, but also like they love it. They have fun. One of my favorite all time to see live. I've traveled to see them multiple times. If they come to Nashville, I'm always there. Prices are always much more affordable, like amazing. Even at when we were young, prioritized. We saw them, even though I saw them like 3 or 4 times last year. Didn't care, had to see them again. Never disappoints. Absolute favorite to see live currently. And again, they play in smaller venues. They don't play in giant arenas. And that's one big reason. Like I'm gonna love the My Chemical Romance tour, I'm sure, but like a lot gets lost in the arena. I'm not a pit girl. I never will be. I have too much anxiety for that. But I like to at least have a good view and like a good experience. And it's just tough in an arena. I'm just not a big arena fan. So Story of the Year, definitely my favorite to see live. So style, if you look at like my style, how I present the songs I love, I'm definitely more pop punk than emo. Probably tell, but that's probably how I identify the most. And again, as we get into like the definitions and all of that, like maybe we can like define that a little bit better. I think pop punk is like under the emo umbrella. I think some people would say they're different umbrellas or the opposite, but I'm definitely more pop punk in terms of what I am most often kind of into and my vibe, if you will. But I love my emo girlies and guys. And I definitely have those moments. And I would still consider myself very emo, but more pop punk, probably. Probably neurodivergent. I'm not diagnosed with anything. Um, but my brain is always going, it's always on. And my brain loves expectations and structure and process. So, not necessarily black and white. I'm very open minded to nuance. I'm in science as a profession, and that's necessary. But you'll notice that I'm going to be prepared. My anxiety is very high because I need to know what the expectations are at all times. And that doesn't always fit into this world. I think there's a big subset of us that are this way. And I think for some of us, it is an excuse and a reason, and in the space is a way to like let go of that and like be free. And that my brain just doesn't always allow that. So that will come out. And so you'll probably be wondering, am I pursuing any type of diagnosis? No. Am I going to talk about it that often? No. But you'll see it, and it's probably true. So a little bit about me. I wrote down anxiety because yes, I have very high levels of anxiety, a lot linked to that childhood experience that I had of needing control, needing to know outcomes and expectations, um, feeling that kind of danger, and just being a woman in the United States. I feel like there's always danger. There's always this kind of preparation that's needed, all that stuff. So I do have a lot of anxiety. I do not medicate it. I do not necessarily treat it. I like to become friends with it and use it as much of a strength as I can. And then I do a lot in my life to take care of it and to work through it. But again, you're going to see it because we're going to talk about concerts and prep. And I am high anxiety. I prep like tremendously for concerts. Last year, I believe we did like the math on it, and I think we saw maybe 35 different bands. One of like not even counting all of our repeats. but I think we went to like 13 or 14 concerts. One of them was the festival. So I do go out and do things. I do not hold myself back. I just am very prepared at how I approach it, and I overthink it a lot. But I still make it work. And so if that is you and you don't make it work, I'm going to share some tips, and like I'll share what I do, and maybe you can make it work. Um, that would be cool. I am extremely introverted, very, very introverted, and I preserve energy at all cost. I do well online because I'm technically by myself with my dog right now. Um, and I have control over that. And so this takes a little bit less energy, but you will see it in shifts and waves of content that I put out. If I do any type of like interviewing in like spaces with concerts and things like that. But I'm extremely introverted, and socially, I get very anxious in social situations as well. So part of who I am. My favorite concert position. What's yours? I'm curious. Concert position. Again, not a pit girly. I am a watching from the upper tier against the railing or from the back against the sound booth kind of go. I'm short. I'm 5'4". My husband is very tall. He's 6'4". So we have to be in a place where I can still see. I'm not going to get smushed, but then also he's not blocking everybody's view. So I would love to be in the front because I could see better for sure, but I would have a panic attack. And then he also doesn't really work well there. And so being far enough back where I'm not too close to the crowd so that I can see over people's heads, that's a big one. I prefer right against the sound thing, because then I have like something to lean against. I can sit down between sets. Um, no one's gonna like run into me, all that stuff. I feel safe there. So that's my vibe. There's a venue here in Nashville called Brooklyn Bowl. I think they're in multiple places, like Brooklyn, obviously, but they have like an upper tier section, and that is dream position. Looking down on the band, seeing a good view, but like not being in the midst of like the mosh pit and all that kind of stuff. Like that is not for me. I get too overwhelmed, too anxious, and would probably get in an actual fight with someone if they touch me because I'm always on edge. Um, if you follow Enneagram stuff, personality stuff, if that relates to you at all, I'm an Enneagram 4 with a heavy 5 wing. I deeply feel and experience the highs and the lows. I am also curious, which is why we're here. So that makes sense. I'm an Aries. I don't know anything else in terms of astrology, but maybe that makes sense too as well. Um, and I can alternate between emotions and feelings and experiences in my own body and in my own world at any time, as many of you probably also experience. So we're here, right? We're deeply emotional, we deeply feel. And sometimes we have trouble expressing because maybe we're all over the place with how we feel. We're in company, we are together. So that is me. That is my emo story. That is why I'm here. That is who I am. I hope that you're interested and want to follow along. I have a deep fear of rejection. I should have added that as well. I do not like being rejected. I have a lot of fear of putting myself out there, but I also have seen the benefit of that. And so I'm doing it anyways. But I want to connect with you, and I hope that that resonates. But what can you expect as we move forward? So if you continue to listen, if you show up, what can we expect? So again, I will share some of my own experiences, the bands that I love, concert recaps, things like that for sure, because again, that's a lot of what I do with my time, and I'd love to share with people who care and maybe have some stories to share themselves. But the majority of the show is going to be about learning. It is School of Emo for a reason. I want to learn about the history of bands, the history of maybe music, songs that we love, the tours, like all the fun stuff that I, again, never experienced as much firsthand. So I'll be doing a lot of research around those things, digging into past like chat rooms and all of that stuff to start those conversations. But I'm also going to host guests to share their experiences, the lore that they're obsessed with, the history that they love and could talk about for hours. And I want to know how the emo music scene, this world, this culture has impacted others and you. I want to know your experiences because I'm genuinely curious and interested and want to be even more connected than I already am. So if that is you and you're interested in being a guest, you don't have to be famous or known. Like that's not the point, right? No arrogance here. It's not what we're here for. But if you are interested in like talking about something that you're like, I could talk about this for hours, I want to share it, then email me. It's in the show notes. Go find it. The only rule is that we do not judge others' opinions or experiences, and we don't come in with arrogance, right? So if you're part of this world, you are connected, you are accepted, and your experiences and your opinions, they're all 100% valid and welcome, I believe. And you may disagree. That's okay. Start your own podcast. I am welcome to other perspectives. I'm welcome to differing opinions. I think that that's important. I also think there's a way to share them that's not filled with hate or judgment or, again, arrogance. Because ultimately, like, we are here to connect to each other, and to be united in community. That's the point. It's going to help us live a long time, right? So we don't want to divide ourselves. Beyond like playful banter, yes. A little bit of debate, yeah. I want to hear those different opinions and experiences, but everyone's is still valid. There's room for everybody's experience here. So that is what I ask of you. I'm hopefully not going to have to do a lot of blocking and, all of that stuff. I don't want to do that. So the goal would be to open up that and then everyone have that respect for each other. Or if you just don't have that and you're like, that, I want to share hateful things and like I'm always right and I need that opinion known. Again, please go start your own podcast. You don't have to follow along here. That's okay. There's plenty of spaces, I think, for that that exist. Maybe you know what they are. You can recommend them and others can go find you there. All right. So before we go, we are going to end each episode, I think. Everything's going to be experiment for a while, but with moments. This is where I'll share a story or experience from our community. And so you can submit yours, but I'm going to start with mine until we get some submissions and people are actually listening. So moments. And we will talk about my first Yellow Card concert. I hinted towards this, but it was such a great experience. So 2016, Yellow Card, it was, I believe, the second or third time that they broke up, but they did like their final tour, final album. And they did this like really big, like we're ending with this giant tour. I was in Nashville at the time and their closest location, even though Ryan Key lived in Nashville at the time, which is kind of annoying. Like he lived in Nashville, Josh Portman still lives in Nashville. Like they could have done a Nashville show, but they didn't. They went to Atlanta. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Atlanta. I had this like situationship, which was this guy liked me. I just wanted to be his friend, but he was the first person in my adult life that liked all the same music as me. And so I held him close, shouldn't have, definitely let him on. Anyways, heard that Yellow Card was going on their final tour and signed up for the pre-sale, got tickets with this friend of mine. And I think it was a November show. Well, lo and behold, I met my now husband like late September. We started dating in October. We were married a year later, so it was very fast. But I met this man and he liked some of like, remember that Christian stuff that I said, like the kind of alternative, like we're thinking Red, Disciple, like Hawk Nelson, like Hey, Under Oath, like that world of like Christian music. He liked that stuff, but not necessarily as like enveloped into like the emo pop punk world. So he didn't know Yellow Card, but we had just started dating. This friendship with this other guy was weird because again, he liked me, but like friendships get weird when you start dating somebody. Like it was kind of odd. Kind of tried to connect them, but obviously he was not interested in that because he wanted to be with me and that wasn't going to go forward. And so he sold the ticket to my now husband. We had just started dating. Atlanta is like 3 to 4 hours away, I believe, from here. It's been a while. Our families, again, we didn't want to get a hotel room. So what we did is we drove to Atlanta for the show. We camped at like a campground outside of Atlanta. So we set up our tent on the way to Atlanta. We went to like this like shopping mall area. It's like walk around. We ate dinner, went to the show, and then went back to the campground. I had gone to concerts growing up and I'd gone to some I went to, Jonas Brothers and Hilary Duff, like younger. I went to a lot of those Christian bands I mentioned. So I've had some good experiences at concerts, come alive, singing music. But this was truly like a surreal experience for me because one, I knew every single song, every single lyric of the show, screamed my lungs out dancing. I'm not an outwardly, like you can probably even tell, I don't express a lot. I'm not a very expressive person. I am not one to like dance in public and like I'm not touchy. Like that is not me. I call myself very monotone primarily. And at this show, I feel like I just like let go. I felt so free. People were not pushing each other. Nobody was shoving. I felt like I was at home. It's like these are my people. This is amazing. I'm having so much fun. This is perfect. In between like the bands, I don't even remember the opener. Like again, it was a blur in time. But in between all of the bands until Yellow Card started, they played like pop punk emo music. We all screamed our lungs out for that music, just like we did for Yellow Card. Like such a cool community. If you went to that final tour, I'm sure it was like that everywhere. I feel like I've never experienced anything quite like it since, just because I think it was just so special to me at the time. So for me, it was such like a special experience that I probably have, and I may even like be making it more rosy and wonderful than it may have even been. Like maybe you were at that show as well. But it was so special to me and something I will never forget. The best concert I've ever been to, just because of what it meant to me. My husband was actually very sick, or Alex. We'll introduce Alex. He was very sick. He stood there. I was obviously not going to leave. Like you could pass out and like you can go call 911 yourself. Like I'm not leaving. Um, but he was sick and we got him medicine on the way to the campground. He had to camp, but it was a trooper about it. Probably when we fell in love and knew that this was going to last. But he had never heard like anything beyond like major hits, like Ocean Avenue, Only One. Didn't know anything else from Yellow Card. And like after that day, he started listening to them. That was like the spearhead to like him being open to all the music that I like, and coming to concerts with me and trusting me with that. But it was such an amazing experience. I didn't buy any merch, which I regret, but I had no money. I mean, I was working at the government at the time. It was a stretch just for me to get the $50 ticket or however much it cost, and to even get there. Like, I had no money. I regret it now because I would love to have a poster. I have a poster from their comeback tour because, of course, I went. What was that, 2022? When was that? The last few years have been a blur. So correct me, but I went to the New York City Pier 17 show. Maybe Parade in Yellow, or Story of the Year Open, like dream as well. Amazing. Alex went with me. It was like a fun reunion moment of like, we're back. And so I got a poster there because I did like the VIP thing. But I regretted. I was like, I wish I had a piece of merch from that 2016 Atlanta show because it was just such a big moment for me. And I will always look back on that with full like love of it. And I hope some of you were there because that would tie us together. If you are interested in sharing your moment, something fun, maybe someone you met, I'll share as many of mine as I can, the good, the bad, the funny, the happy, like whatever, almost unbelievable, like email me. You can find the email in the show notes, but email me. So if you want to be a guest, you want to share an moment, go down to the show notes. All right, so that's a wrap on our first episode, and School of Emo podcast is officially alive and well. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for joining me on this journey of building a community that gets to learn together, obsess over our favorite bands, and share in this love and pieces of ourselves that we maybe haven't shared or just want to share more. I invite you into my little emo family and emo friendship by subscribing, following, saving, downloading, whatever you got to do to get the new episodes. The goal is that these episodes will be released weekly, and we will dive into so many different topics. So buckle up, be prepared for a lot of interesting conversations. And again, if you want to be part of these conversations, comment, interact, tell me what you want, lead me down a path to research, I'll do it. But also, you are welcome to come on. You are invited into this space. And so go to the show notes, find the email address, reach out to me, and I would love to have you on. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you again. And I'll see you in our next class.